In January of 1925, a doctor in the isolated town of Nome, Alaska, looked into a little boy's throat and realized his absolute worst nightmare had just come true. It was diphtheria, an incredibly contagious and deadly respiratory disease, and it was spreading. Nome was a remote gold rush town, trapped in the dead of the Alaskan winter. The port was frozen solid, surrounded by miles of jagged sea ice. The temperatures were hovering around 60 degrees below zero. It was so cold that airplane engines would instantly freeze mid-air, meaning nobody could fly in. The closest batch of life-saving medicine was 674 miles away. The children of Nome had only days to live. The town held an emergency meeting and came up with a desperate, seemingly impossible plan. They would set up a relay of 20 dog sled teams to pass the medicine across the frozen Alaskan wilderness, day and night, through the worst winter storm in a century. Now, if you know anything about this story, you probably know the name Balto. There is a famous animated movie about him, and a bronze statue of him sitting in Central Park in New York. But here is the secret that history tried to bury. Balto was just the backup dog who ran the final, relatively safe 55 miles of the relay. The real hero of the 1925 serum run? The dog who looked death in the face and pulled a town back from the brink? Was a 12-year-old Siberian husky named Toggo. In dog years, a 12-year-old husky is a senior citizen. He should have been sleeping by a fire. But his owner, a legendary musher named Leonard Seppala, knew that Toggo was the only dog smart enough to navigate the deadliest stretch of the relay. Seppala and Toggo were assigned to cross the Norton Sound. This was a shortcut across the frozen ocean. It was a chaotic nightmare of jagged, shifting sea ice, and they had to cross it in the middle of a hurricane-force blizzard. The wind chill dropped to -85 degrees. The snow was blowing so hard that Seppala couldn't see his own hand in front of his face, let alone the dogs in front of his sled. He was entirely blind. For hours, in the pitch-black, freezing darkness, Seppala surrendered his life to the instincts of his lead dog. Toggo navigated purely by scent and feeling. He zigzagged the team across the ice, sensing where the frozen ocean was dangerously thin, pulling them away from open water that would have killed them in minutes. But then, the ice cracked. With a deafening roar, the ice sheet they were running on broke away from the shoreline. They were suddenly trapped on a floating ice floe, drifting out into the freezing Bering Sea. Seppala realized they were going to die. But as the ice floe drifted close to the main pack of ice, Seppala tied a rope to Toggo and threw the dog across the freezing water onto the solid shore. The plan was for Toggo to pull the floating ice sheet close enough for Seppala to jump. But the rope snapped. The heavy leather line fell into the freezing water. Toggo was safe on the shore. He could have survived. Instead, this 12-year-old dog leaped into the icy ocean, grabbed the freezing leather rope in his jaws, pulled himself out, and rolled his body into the snow like a winch. He wrapped the rope around his own shoulders and pulled with everything he had until the ice floe bumped against the shore, saving Seppala and the medicine. In total, while other teams ran average legs of about 30 miles, Toggo and Seppala ran an unbelievable 260 miles through the deadliest storm in Alaskan history. They handed off the serum, collapsed from exhaustion, and saved the town. But because another team took the very last leg into town, the press crowned Balto as the hero. Balto got the fame, the movie deals, and the statues. Seppala was heartbroken. He felt the world had forgotten the greatest dog to ever live. But the beautiful truth is, Toggo did not care about statues. Years later, when Toggo was finally too old to run, Seppala made the difficult decision to give him to a wealthy woman in Maine so the old dog could live out his final days lounging in a warm mansion, treated like royalty. But a few weeks later, the woman called Seppala in a panic. Toggo had jumped through a closed glass window, escaped the mansion, and ran for miles through the strange town. When Seppala went looking for him, he found the old dog waiting patiently back at Seppala's camp. Toggo didn't want the luxury. He didn't want the fame. He just wanted his best friend. Seppala never tried to give him away again, and Toggo spent the rest of his life exactly where he belonged, right by his master's side. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never ask for the credit. If you loved this story, hit that subscribe button. We have plenty more incredible true stories coming your way. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next one.